Hello everyone, and welcome to One Control Port Podcast, episode 176. I'm Benjamin Yoder, here today to talk to you about video games, and this week I actually have stuff to talk about. Man, last week I sure felt like it was like, I'm here talking on this podcast because I have to be. So I'm glad I have actual things to talk about this week, including that I went ahead and beat Bionic Commando Elite Forces, so that's all finished up. If you didn't listen last week, Bionic Commando Elite Forces is a Game Boy Color game by Nintendo Software Technology in the Bionic Commando franchise. So I went and put a good chunk of time into that, and I ran into a problem. I don't remember if this came up last week or not, but apparently that game does not run very well on Game Boy Advance. So about halfway through the game, there's all these issues that come into play with opening up particular menus and then also loading certain levels where the game will just hang. And on the menus with like the inventory and everything, the graphics all distort and everything. But then when you're loading the levels and you get stuck there, basically just the screen fades to white and then it just stays white. And so initially I thought, oh, there's an issue with the cartridge or something. But somebody had mentioned on Twitter that they were having issues playing on Game Boy Advance as well, and that they had to get a Game Boy Color to finish the game. So I went ahead and got my Game Boy Advanced and confirmed those are issues on my Game Boy Advance as well. I was playing it via the Game Boy Player on the GameCube, which is Game Boy Advance based hardware. And then I went and got my Game Boy Color, which I just so happen to have still. And it ran perfectly fine on Game Boy Color. So what I did was I kind of like swapped back and forth between the two games. I would go ahead and play up to a save point on the Game Boy Color, save, go to my Game Boy Advance, see if that save point would load. And then if it would load, I'd go ahead and capture some footage from that part of the game until it would crash again, and then I would go ahead and go back to Game Boy Color, play to the next part of the game, and then save, do the same thing back and forth. And thankfully, it wasn't that troublesome. The big reason why is that most of the stuff that crashed the game, things like opening up the inventory before a mission and loading levels, those happen right after a save spot, so you would always get a chance to save right before the game would crash. So that was the helpful thing about that. So I was able to eventually get through a good chunk of the game. I did lose probably about like 3 or 4 levels worth of footage. But I think I got enough at this point that I could probably do some kind of like casual review kind of thing of it. I did really like the game, but being on a Game Boy Color, the screen resolution is just so, the screen's just so small that it's impossible to play that game like in a way that you know where you're going. Like when you were swinging, there's a lot of times you're just doing like a blind jump after a swing. You just don't know what you're going to be grappling onto next. If you're jumping into a pit or you're jumping against an invisible wall, how many grapple points are there on the other side? It's just a lot going on that you can't see really. But overall, if you can get over that, I think it's a very fun game. And, obviously you need a Game Boy Color to play it. And thinking about it, I'm not really sure what options there are out there to play Game Boy Color games on like a TV and capture it. I mean, obviously via emulation, I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a Game Boy Color specific emulator out there. But in terms of like, a Game Boy Color with video out, I'm not particularly aware of that. I think most people probably just use the Game Boy Player, which is Game Boy Advance based hardware, and the Super Game Boy, I'm pretty sure the Super Game Boy is just Game Boy. I don't think there's any Game Boy Color support on the Super Game Boy. So yeah, I had fun with that, and I enjoyed it. It was neat. So I'll probably go ahead and do some kind of a casual review thing that I'll go ahead and put up on the website at some point for that. But nothing in the near future for that. But it was fun. I also put some time into Senran Kagura Reflection. So I ordered this off Limited Run Games a while ago now. I have a lot of grief with Limited Run Games and like how they handle their orders. I think I bought Blaster Master 0, 1, and 2 before I bought Senran Kagura Reflections, and those Blaster Master games are still not here yet. Senran Kagura Reflections is, so I don't know, but I went and bought the physical copy of it off Limited Run Games, and so that includes all the DLC for the game. If you don't know, it was like a downloadable only game for the Switch, and I think it eventually got ported to PC as well at some point. And I was kind of interested in this game for a particular reason of HD Rumble being a big part of that. The big selling point they had was that we want to make this game an HD Rumble based game. I had to go back and look up like the original quotes or something or whatever the general like announcement trailer said about the game. But it seemed to imply that like they wanted to use the HD Rumble in a way that was like essentially touching the girl's body or whatever, because it's a massage game in the Senran Kagura franchise. You know, if you're familiar with Senran Kagura, you know, it's a bunch of busty ladies or whatever. And it definitely fulfills that particular, you know, if you're into Senran Kagura and the intimacy mode in Senran Kagura, it definitely fulfills that part of the game. Well, if anything, it does more than what Senran Kagura, I think, typically does with its intimacy mode, where they give you actual dialogue and stuff with the characters. And the dialogue is more direct dialogue that's more like them saying like, oh, my heart beats when I'm around you specifically kind of thing. Where I think the other Senran Kagura games, most of the dialogue is happening between characters. There's not really much directed at the player. And if there is anything directed at the player, if it's anything like Peach Beach Splash, it's just kind of like off comments when you're like poking them in the intimacy mode or whatever. Where in here, it's like a bunch of scenarios where you're basically like, oh, you're both in like the back, like if you watch the anime, all of this is gonna sound familiar, like in the back room, you know, with them, and while they're in like the gym outfit, and like, oh, give me a massage kind of thing, and then also like, you know, one of them's like your teacher, or she's like pretending to be your teacher or something, and then like they're like, oh, you know, let me teach you about my body or something. It's all very overtly sexual in a way that I was kind of surprised. I think because in like the typical Senran Kagura game or even like Kanagawa Jet Girls, a lot of the dialogue is not really directed in a way that's like very, very sexual, I feel like. I'd have to go back and see what Peach Beach Splash story was like. But I think generally it wasn't like super, super suggestive most of the time. I'm not gonna say all the time. But yeah, maybe I'm just misremembering. But this game definitely was just like a lot of things where she's like, oh, now that you rubbed me there, I'll show you where else you can rub me, or stuff like that. It's like, oh boy, all right. So, and I think it succeeds there. But the biggest problem I have with this game, I'm actually very mad at this game, is just the controls are just, they there's a lot of opportunity with Senran Kagura Reflections to do something where, you know, you have a more, I guess, fourth wall breaking experience in terms of how you're interacting with the character. The thing that keeps coming back to my mind is in Call of Duty 3 for the Wii, there's this whole segment where you are setting a C4 bomb in that game. And admittedly, this is like my memory of like playing this game 14 years ago at this point, right? Or however long it's been since the Wii's launch. You go ahead and like, you use the Wii remote to like set the bomb on the wall. So you like push the remote forward to set it on the wall. You then like put the nunchuck to the side of the Wiimote and twist it to kind of like twist the little pin on it to set the timer. And then you pull the nunchuck out to set the timer, or to like, you know, arm the bomb essentially and start the timer countdown. And that's like a really neat experience of like, the game asking you to do something that you're very involved in the movements, and they are asking you to replicate what these movements are like in real life, step by step. And I think this game kind of gets there, and it opens in a way that it makes it seem like it's gonna be that, where like essentially the game starts with like her holding, or you putting your hands around her hands, and she's like, massage my hands, please. So you have the two JoyCons in your hands, so it's kind of like you're holding the lady's hand or whatever, right? And then you have to press down on the analog sticks to essentially start massaging her hand in particular spots. So you press down the analog stick, and so that's like kind of like you're pressing down on their hand to apply pressure. And then this is where things kind of go bad, where like, so the whole thing is that when you apply pressure to their hands, you then like your character starts like rubbing her hand around and like doing like a massage into her hand kind of thing. But you as the player don't do that. Like even though the analog sticks are there and you can move them and you could do like a massaging, you know, motion, the game doesn't ask you to do that. It just plays that animation out automatically. And there's a lot of things like that in this game where it's like they get part the way there of being like, okay, you're going to, you know, you're gonna, you know, grab her arm or whatever, right? And so it's like, okay, so you know, point the little hand over the arm, and so you would think like for grabbing the arm, something where you grab like the two buttons on the side of the Joy-Con would kind of mimic like a gripping kind of motion kind of thing, right? If you're gripping the ZLZR on the inner side of the Joy-Con. But what they ask you to do is like rotate the Wii remote, or not the Wii remote, the Joy-Con to the left, which is just, it's not really a grabbing motion, right? So there's just weird stuff like that. And then when you are like caressing or whatever, like and like, rubbing parts of their body, sometimes it's like you hold down a button and use the analog stick. I just feel like there's better options for kind of creating that more like physical experience of doing the massaging stuff, right? And I think there was probably a lot more opportunity to make use of like the HD rumble overall. Kind of how it's used in this game is when you're doing the hand rubbing thing, you can feel like the pulse on her hand a little bit as it like starts to beat faster and like it starts to beat harder. So the HD rumble will like kind of pulse, to represent that heartbeat. But from there, it's really only used for in one mode, it's like you can kind of like slap their body in certain parts, and depending on like how much fat is on that part of the body, it will like cause the rumble to jiggle or the rumble to rumble more to like represent the jiggle. So if you slap them on the arm or whatever, your controller doesn't rumble at all. It's like, well, it rumbles, but like just like a very sudden like kind of thing. But then if you like slap their thigh where they got like meat, I guess you could say, then and it like on screen it like jiggles around a bit. The rumble in the controller like will vibrate longer. So it's like there's this interesting seeds of ideas here in terms of how this like it can create this like more physical connection to what's happening on screen, but it just doesn't really execute on it well in a way. It's one of those things that's like I can understand, this is a $10 downloadable title on the Switch, and then every download pack after that's like an extra $10 or whatever, for up to I think 5 characters for a $50 experience there, and then there's like a bunch of outfits you can buy because it's a Senran Kagura game. But like, I don't know, they just seem like small decisions that could have been made in regards to the control, how you're interacting with the Joy-Con, that really could have made the experience like a more interesting thing, a more interesting tech demo, because it just starts you with this thing that feels like you're going to be replicating this very physical interaction with somebody. And then as soon as you start doing those interactions in full, they just fail to actually replicate what you're doing on screen frequently. There's some things I can kind of understand where like when you do some of the massaging stuff, it kind of asks you to be a little, in my brain, the word coming out is violent right now, but like you have to be like really kind of rough with some of the massaging stuff in a way that, I don't know, to me seems like it would be unnatural in a massaging kind of thing, right? Maybe that's comfortable. I don't know. Or maybe it varies per girl. I've only played through Asuka and Yumi so far, but I didn't notice any difference at least. But yeah, there's sometimes just like you need to like kind of like there's one where you brush their arms or whatever, which I don't really know why you're brushing their arms, but you do it. And with that one, it just feels like you have to shake the Joy-Con quickly enough in a way that just doesn't feel natural for how you would, I guess, brush someone's arm. I don't know. It just feels like it should be a bit more like a bit slower and a bit more like in a way that just feels a lot less just like I'm waggling this Joy-Con because I have to finish this task, right? In a way that might be maybe sensual is the word I'm looking for. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. But yeah, like I said though, it like meets what you need if you're looking for that kind of Senran Kagura thing in terms of having a more expansive intimacy mode. But to me, intimacy mode has never been an interest for me when it comes to Senran Kagura, and this game definitely, that kind of content isn't what appeals to me in this game. What appeals to me is like having that more physical interaction with what's happening in the game, and I feel like it just fails in that part. So that was a lot of rambling. I'm sorry. I've been thinking about Senran Kagura Reflections like all this week because it made me so upset. So I think that may, and a lot of what I said is kind of my complete thoughts probably more than anything. I may make that into like a complete video, like not just a casual review, maybe a full Senran Kagura Reflections video, but I'll have to wait and see how things go. There's a lot of, I bought the physical copy that has all the DLC, so they have all five characters from the Senran Kagura franchise. And so I'm probably gonna play through all of them. That's probably not a good idea because it's kind of the same thing, just a different character each time. And each character has 5 endings, and they're basically the exact same ending. They're basically rewritten ways to convey the same information. So I don't really understand why they did it this way, other than just to pad the game. This game feels like a lot of padding in general, to be honest with you. I mean, it does some things interesting in some ways, and it's more expansive than like a typical intimacy mode in a Senran Kagura, but overall it feels very padded. And so I'll probably get through the rest of that. I'm gonna try to maybe do like one girl a night this week. It's about, I think, an hour and a half to 2 hours per character, so. And I could actually, at some point they're just like, hey, if you don't want to actually massage her, you can just skip to the story bits. But it feels kind of like a bad, like, I don't feel like that'd be the right thing to do, right? Like, here's this gameplay mechanic. Okay, remove the gameplay mechanic now. So I could make it faster if I skip that stuff, but I think I'd rather do the full experience there and then be like, okay, I rubbed all these girls, all 5 of them. I did it, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, let's stop talking about that. So yeah, to get to some news stories this week, there's a handful of things. One thing I thought was kind of interesting is GameStop, if you did not hear, is getting some extra revenue from Xbox Series X. So essentially what's happening is if GameStop sells an Xbox Series X, I didn't check to see if there's an Xbox Series S, but I don't see why this wouldn't happen. I'd imagine this would be even more true for an Xbox Series S. Basically, if somebody buys an Xbox from a GameStop, GameStop will be given some revenue based off their digital game purchases, which I think is pretty interesting. And I thought that was like a really, I guess, neat way to get GameStop to push their particular console. I'm guessing Sony doesn't have any kind of thing lined up for this kind of thing. So I thought that was kind of a neat way to like give GameStop some revenue. I don't have a lot of confidence that GameStop's going to last forever, right? But I could definitely see like on an Xbox size how that'd be beneficial to be like, hey, push Xboxes because we're going to get revenue from this. Where on Sony's side, you sell the console and then it's just gone, assuming that Sony's going to do anything. I would wonder if Sony would. Part of me is like, well, GameStop's an American company, or at least as far as I know is American. It's a brand most popular in America. I don't know who actually owns GameStop. I assume somebody in America. But the Sony and Nintendo being Japanese companies, I wonder if they would have that same interest in working with GameStop. That being said, Sony is very Western focused now. It seems like at this point, over the last decade or so, the power of the company has definitely shifted from Japan to, it seems like specifically Europe has gained a lot of control at Sony. I don't know for sure if that is like what the power dynamics are like right now, but I remember there was like a period of time where it seemed like a lot of the power was in America, and then at some point, like 2 years ago, everything was kind of switching over to Sony Europe kind of running the show in some way. I don't have any information on that particularly points it that's true information, but that's my general feeling about who seems to be calling the shots at Sony at this point. I could be wrong about that. So yeah, I guess speaking of that kind of westernization of Sony though, I think this may have been announced a couple weeks back or a week or so ago, but if you didn't hear, the PlayStation 5 is having its X and circle inputs basically switch for Japan. So if you don't know, in Japan, for PlayStation platforms, the circle button is kind of the yes button when you like select menus on the items, and the X button is like a cancel button. And for some reason in the West that never really caught on. Instead, it was the X button to confirm, and then mainly just the X button to confirm. I think some games kind of switch around what the cancel button is, whether that be circle, square, or triangle. I feel like it's either circle or triangle typically for unconfirming or canceling out of the menu or whatever. So one thing that Inside Games did is they did a poll of the Japanese community to see, or their community, to see how they felt about the circle and X swapping. And I thought some of the opinions were kind of interesting that were in there. For the actual stats, I don't have the exact numbers here, but it basically seemed to be like a 30-30 split between either not caring or being okay with it as long as they offer the ability to set it in the system level. And then 40% was like, actually don't change it. But some of the comments were basically saying that like whenever Western games come out in Japan, it sounds like they don't swap those button functionalities typically. So Japan gets the same problem that we have with some games where the circle and X button are essentially swapped for them, right? So they had some people on there that are like, oh, this is actually really good across the board for us because now we don't have to switch back and forth between Japanese and US games in that Circle X setup. But there's also like this feeling that one person shared that was just like, it won't be a problem for people who are typically playing games because they're basically used to it now from Western games. But they said for casual gamers in Japan, they felt like it would be a problem because if you don't know, in Japan, like the circle mark is like okay, like yes, good, correct kind of thing. So that's like visual language for Japan and how you convey that information. And so they were saying for a casual gamer that may not play games very often, that could become pretty confusing. So I thought that was an interesting perspective. I'll link the story in the podcast post that has like a full set of opinions that they kind of took excerpts from and posted on the website, what that poll looked like. But yeah, I thought that was kind of some interesting insights on what the Japanese player base thought about that Circle and X thing swapping. I personally don't care. It seems a little weird that, the platform where it originated as Circle and X, in Japan, obviously, for Circle being confirmed, is now basically removing that original assignment from them from Japan. But, Western audiences are big now, right? And Sony is mainly operating in Europe and the US at this point. I'm sure if they had the choice between the two markets out of the three, they would choose Europe and the US, not Japan at this point. So yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting little bit of information. One company that is not succeeding though in the US though is Level 5. There's a story going around this week. The source I have here is Siliconera, but I actually did not check to see if this is the original source or just somebody on Siliconera also reporting this. But yeah, basically Level 5 apparently has like a skeleton crew in the US, which is maybe to be expected. I can't recall the last time Level 5 had a hit in the US. I think Ni no Kuni did okay, but I don't think Ni no Kuni ever really took off. Like Ni no Kuni 1 kind of benefited around the time of, Americans, or I think Westerners in general, but particularly in America, I can kind of speak for this, there just being not really a great mainstream interest in Japanese RPGs. And Ni no Kuni was one of the few games that kind of broke through and kind of reached a subsegment of the mainstream audience. Not a full like, it was not like this big million seller, if I recall correctly, but, it had some penetration where a lot of Japanese RPGs just weren't having that at that time. And I feel like that was kind of the last thing I can think of that was somewhat successful, right? I think Fantasy Life may have had some minor success. But yeah, really Professor Layton was the last time I remember Level 5 like having a real big hit in the US. I'm trying to think of the last Level 5 game I played. I know I played Rogue Galaxy for the PlayStation 2, and I played Professor Layton. I did like the Level 5 series on 3DS. I forget what they were called, but they're basically a bunch of smaller games that were like in a collection. The Guild series, that's what it's called, the Guildo 1 and Guildo 2 series. In Japan, they were sold as physical copies and then a collection of games, but in the US, they're sold separately digitally. Attack of the Friday Monsters being a big one. I mean, Level 5 didn't develop that, but they were basically releasing that stuff, I believe, in the West as well. So really, so what does this mean, right? In the short term, I think something that had already been a big concern is Yokai Watch 4. They had announced Yokai Watch 4 for localization, but I think Yokai Watch 3 bombed pretty hard. I mean, Nintendo America kind of sent it out to die with barely any physical copies. I don't know sales-wise how it did digitally. So I think even after Yokai Watch 3, I did not have a ton of confidence Yokai Watch 4 would be coming out. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see, unless Nintendo is specifically being like, hey, we got to make Yokai Watch 4 happen, right? I think we're probably not going to see Yokai Watch 4 at this point. It just seems like it's been a long time. Maybe I'm overestimating the meaning of Level 5 being a skeleton crew. in the West, but I feel like Yokai Watch never really took off in the way it did in Japan, and we're already kind of past the series prime in Japan too, and I feel like the boat was kind of missed on making Yokai Watch work in the West. And then there's Snack World, which I need to pick up Snack World. I think Snack World also bombed pretty hard, but I was always really interested in Snack World. It's basically like a top-down action RPG, and it finally got localized on the Switch, and I never picked it up. I really should. I think I looked at the price recently, and it's like $30-ish, so it's not that expensive. But yeah, I'd imagine for the most part they're probably working with other publishers. I think they have been for a while. Like I think Ni no Kuni 2 is a Bandai Namco game, right? Maybe the original Ni no Kuni was also Bandai Namco. I can't remember for sure, but. And swinging back to Sony here a little bit, I don't really have a lot to say about this. This is a news story that came out. I think it was kind of rumored the week before that the PlayStation 3, Vita, and PSP, the software for those games or those platforms would no longer be purchasable from like the PC storefront if you're logged into like a web-based browser. Which, you know, it kind of is annoying that you have to buy content through the original platforms they're on, except for PSP. I think PSP store is shut down. I think you have to buy PSP content through the Vita and PS3 stores. Then you can transfer PSP games over from either the Vita or the PS3, I think is how that works. But largely you'll have to shop for those games on the PS3 or the Vita itself. The only unfortunate part about this right now is, man, the PlayStation Store runs like garbage on the PlayStation 3. Like, I have that thing lock up half the time every time booted up. So I don't have a ton of confidence that it will be a great user experience. But I think this is kind of, you know, any kind of storefront, you know, shutting down is an inevitability, and we're not getting it shut down yet, so I'm not too concerned at this moment. But, you know, this is definitely one of the earliest signs of PlayStation 3, Vita, and PSP games no longer being available, you know, or approaching that time frame, right? You know, I would love for those platforms to be, or those digital storefronts to be available forever, but, you know, you look at the WiiWare and PlayStation Mobile and those things, you know, at least we got like a year heads up. So I think people bought a lot of what they wanted. And thankfully those platforms were very well archived as far as I'm aware. I think most of that stuff is available if you want to get it. Admittedly, the Wii is a very hackable system, right? And I don't know the case with PlayStation Mobile so much. I'm a little worried that some PlayStation Mobile stuff is just up and gone forever. Like, did somebody back up Soul Brain 1 through 9 or 11, however many of those Soul Brain games there were? Nobody in their right mind probably did, but I hope somebody did. So yeah, it's just. I don't know, it's sad to see that stuff go, but we're not quite there yet, so I don't have any real strong feelings about them kind of limiting the storefronts to their original platforms, but it is kind of annoying, but I'm not pulling the fire alarm yet on this one, but you know, it's only a matter of time until the storefronts shut down. And the news story I was most excited about this week is Analog is doing a TurboGrafx Duo system. So, you know, it's a aftermarket TurboGrafx Duo or PC Engine Duo, whatever you want to call it. And you know, it's FPGA based like their Super Nintendo and their Genesis models. So if you don't know what this is, basically they're hardware emulation devices, and they're meant to run your original games on those platforms. They also have SD card slots, so I think people typically make a workaround where you can load games off the SD card slot. I don't know for sure, but that was always the kind of underground kind of thing out here, is that like, hey, this thing technically only runs Super Nintendo carts, but also you could load your custom firmware and just play whatever you want on here, you know? So basically I think like a bunch of cores and stuff, like custom cores that people would make for those platforms. So I'm pretty excited about that, because if you haven't been around for too long, I was actually really interested in picking up a PC Engine Duo or TurboGrafx 16 Duo. I wanted a way to play CD-based TurboGrafx game. Why? Because I want to play Private Idol, the greatest Unix game ever made. I don't know. I played Private Idol via emulator and really enjoyed it. It's like this top-down kind of, the first hour and a half of the game is like this very like haunted house kind of thing. It's kind of weird because it's this weird haunted house idol thing, but also I think she transforms into like a super hero that like has this like cannon gun or something. I don't really know that much about Private Idol despite playing like an hour of it, but I really enjoyed what I played of it. It's like an adventure game kind of thing. Feels very Resident Evil-ish in some ways. But a bit more, you know, more of an anime aesthetic and more fun about it with a lot of different characters and things like that. So I was pretty excited to see that. The only problem being is that I think these things are kind of difficult to get, and I think they said that they're going to be a limited quantity units. I don't know if they said the same about the Super Nintendo and the Genesis ones, and then just like bring them back when it makes sense, or if this is literally just going to be, we're going to make one run, and then maybe we'll make more runs after that. So my hope is that maybe the TurboGrafx and the PC Engine is less in demand, and that I'll be able to get this somewhat easily. It's like $200 and it comes out I think next year. But $200 for a TurboGrafx CD that I don't have to worry about buying a refurbished unit with like that's been recapped and everything, and with a disk drive that hopefully works kind of thing. That's a pretty big deal for me, and I always I've always preferred to have original hardware when possible, but in the case of the TurboGrafx and the PC Engine, it wasn't making a lot of sense. And I was looking at the Polymega, but that's software emulation, so I do worry a bit more about that. And there's also, like, with the Polymega, like, a lot of other platforms kind of built into that thing. And, you know, whenever you have kind of that great diversity of support on that device, I feel like you're going to not get quite the attention that any single platform might need on that thing. So you might have one platform that lags behind the other ones, which admittedly, Analog has a lot of different, you know, hardware that they put out there, but I feel like I'm maybe a little more comfortable buying a device meant for one thing rather than one that's just like this big all-in-one kind of thing, like a Retron 5 or something like that, right? Admittedly, I don't think Hyperkin has the greatest track record in general, so maybe the Retron 5 is a poor comparison for Polymega there, but yeah, so I hope to get that, and I hope to be able to check that out. Speaking of Private Idol, in the chronicles of Ben wasting money, I bought a Private Idol mouse pad. So I got it I saw it on Yahoo Auctions Japan a while ago, and it was like $22 or something like that, which, you know, when you're buying stuff from Yahoo Auctions Japan, you also have to consider the fact that you have to, you know, get a proxy service in place and pay the shipping fees and all that stuff. So you're probably looking at something closer to like, you know, 30 something bucks, if not more than that. I feel like my rule of thumb usually with proxy services is that whatever you're buying, double it, and then that's probably going to be the price that you're going to pay. That's not always true. Depends, I think, on the type of item you're buying, the weight of it, things like that. The Final Fantasy 11 mugs I bought a while ago was more like a little over double the price rather than double the price in that case. But then it actually, I think somebody picked it up and essentially bought it and then tried to sell it on their own on eBay, and it was floating around for $40 for a long time. I was like, oh, $40 is a lot of money for a mouse pad. And then eventually this week I made an offer to them for $30, and they let me buy it for $30. So I was like, oh, awesome. So that was probably, you know, about the price I would have paid to get it from Yahoo Auctions Japan, right? So I bought it off eBay, and it has like free shipping. So it should get here, I think, November. It's actually shipping from Japan, so I think it's going to be a slow shipping thing. So hopefully it survives on the trip over. I don't know what the shippability of mouse pads are. I would think it's probably fine. And you might be being like, why do you need a Private Idol mouse pad, Ben? Well, two things. One, if you don't know, I use a trackball mouse on my actual PC, so I don't actually need a mouse pad on my actual PC because I use that thing where I use my thumb to move the mouse cursor around, because a lot of people think I'm a monster, but, you know, that's just the kind of mouse I grew up with, and that's like what's comfortable for me. I also hear it's good for your wrist compared to like a normal mouse, but, you know, who can say? My wrists are probably not exactly in the best condition either. But the other thing is that I have a PC98 here that I want to spend more time with, and that has a mouse with it, and I don't have a mouse pad for that. And then also, extra dumb money spending, I'm looking at buying a PCFX mouse right now, which you're like, why do you need a PCFX mouse, Ben? It's like, well, I was buying Farland Story, and it has PCFX mouse support, and I was like, maybe, what if I used a mouse with Farland Story? So, I don't know. I'm not sure what the mouse is going to cost. I went ahead and asked Vink to look into it for me. Typical one on eBay seems to be about $80, which is quite a bit of money. So I basically, I'm always happy to give Vink business. So I basically told Vink, if you can find it for under $80, I'll be happy with that. like if you can get that, I will buy it whatever price you find it for. But yeah, so we'll see how that goes. I don't know. I don't need a PCFX mouse, but here we are today. I made that request, and there's that. Whew. A lot of info this week on this podcast. Thanks for coming. OneControlReport.com is the website. One other thing I wanted to touch on before we move on to the post-credit stuff, like what's going on thing. There's some anime I was looking at called it's a German thing, Magatsu Wahrheit Zurest. I love Xenosaga's subtitles. And it's apparently based off a mobile game, but I actually thought the anime looked pretty neat, so I might check that anime out. I don't know for sure yet. I don't really know what it's about. I just like how it looks aesthetically more than anything, to be honest. So, yeah, I might check that out, but I don't think Crunchyroll is streaming it, so I might have to look in to see where I can actually watch it. Anyways, anime, done. Out the window. Throwing the anime out the window. Thank you for coming. OneControlReport.com is the website. So in terms of what's coming up this week, I'm streaming more Billy Hatcher on Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. I think we're probably going to beat the main story Billy Hatcher this week. It seems like we're getting there, at least in terms of like how things are progressing. It seems likely that we're on kind of the last set of levels, which seems very short. But the majority of the game, we might run into a situation where it's like, oh, you have to collect this many, essentially star equivalents to fight the final boss or whatever. So we might have to run into that. But essentially, if I do beat that game on stream, I'm going to spend the rest of the time just collecting additional stuff in Billy Hatcher and then see how I feel about it then. If you didn't watch the last stream for Billy Hatcher, it was rough. Admittedly, part of it's like I'm streaming, and so I feel like the stress of like a performance stress kind of thing to make sure I'm not just boring everybody. I spent about 45 minutes on one room, which is great. But I'm just, even in general, even outside that room, I'm just kind of losing my patience with that game. There's just something about Billy Hatcher is just not clicking with me, and I don't know what it is. It's one of those things where it's like there's a lot of cool ideas here, but none of it ever like comes together in a way, and like I also have a hard time envisioning how it comes together. I'm probably very unpopular in this opinion of I feel very similar about Mega Man Legends. Mega Man Legends is a game that I should really like. On paper, it looks like a game I should really like, but when I sit down and play Mega Man Legends, I don't like it that much. Like, it's fine, but I think it's very skippable. Like, considering how people talk about it, I think it's not that great of a game. I need to play Mega Man Legends 2 at some point. That being said, that's a whole other thing. I made a video review of Mega Man Legends if you want to see that. Let's plug some old content. I don't think that's a good video review. That was like from the dark times of video reviews that happened. And then I believe this week we have a casual review of The Last Rebellion. So that's going to go, Last Rebellion. I almost said The Last Remnant. Last Rebellion, so that's going up on the website. If you've watched the whole stream, you probably don't need to check in on that. But if you do want to kind of see my feelings summed up in about 10-15 minutes, I kind of talk about why I like The Last Rebellion, also the problems I had with The Last Rebellion. Again, I think that game is surprisingly pretty cool, despite all the negative information about that game out there. But again, it is a problematic game in a lot of ways too. So I kind of understand, but I also think people maybe were a little too reactionary to that. And then yeah, I think that's it. Super Mario Land featured review, although a shorter featured review. It's like 5 minutes long rather than the usual 8 to 9 minutes. That's going up in early November. So that is set up, scheduled, and done. So that is finished. In The Last Rebellion, the Last Story podcast, I went ahead and created an outline for that. And it's kind of in a weird state right now. I'm having a hard time with last story. So I'm hoping that it's good enough. I might go ahead and share it with the rest of the group and then kind of get their thoughts on it. And then there are also some other stuff may have come up that may prevent us from recording that in the near future. So I might plan to try to get something else ready for December, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, again, I'm not even really confident in my outline yet at this point. So let alone, trying to organize the actual thing going on. So that's largely my fault at this point. Last Story is such a complicated game to talk about, I feel like. And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe. Anyways, so that's it for this week. Thanks for coming. OneControlReport.com is the website, and I hope you have a great week. Bye!